After my husband passed away, my daughter-in-law looked me in the eye over dinner and said, "Now that he is gone, grieve quickly, pack your things and do not come back." My son simply smiled and nodded in agreement. Follow my story until the end and hit subscribe if this resonates with you. And let me know in the comments from which city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. She added that the house was never really mine to begin with. I left that night without saying a word. The following day I went to the bank, and I am glad you are here. The dining room felt unfamiliar without Noel. The big mahogany table that once held so many family meals now felt too large and hollow even with the three of us present. I kept glancing at his empty seat, hoping to see his soft smile again. A full week had passed since we laid to rest the man I spent 32 years loving. 1 week since I stood by his grave feeling like I had been torn in half. My chest still felt heavy with grief, making each breath a struggle. "Pass the potatoes," Romy said sharply. Her voice always lacked warmth, but tonight it felt colder than usual. I reached for the bowl, my hands still unsteady. The funeral had left me more exhausted than I imagined. At 71 I believed I was prepared for this, but I was not. Nothing could have prepared me for the hollow ache that followed. Wade, my 43-year-old son, sat between us like a referee already loyal to one team. He avoided eye contact with me all evening, focusing only on his wife of 15 years. The boy who once crawled into my arms during storms could not even look at me now. I said the service was lovely, trying to break the silence. "Your father would have loved the turnout." Romy set down her fork slowly. "Yes, actually we need to talk about that, Myrtle." Her tone made my stomach twist. I looked at her and Wade, searching for any warmth between people who had just lost someone but found none. "What do you mean?" I asked, though part of me feared the answer. Romy straightened in her seat in that posture she used when delivering demands. I had seen it before, especially when she explained why Wade could not visit or why our family traditions should be replaced with hers. "Wade and I discussed," she began in that fake sweet tone she used when she wanted something. "Now that Noel is gone," she said, "this house will be too much for you." I was stunned. "Too much?" I asked. "I have kept this home for over 30 years. I know every squeaky board, every tricky faucet." "Yes, and that is the issue," Romy replied, losing her friendly face. "You are aging and this house is expensive to maintain. Wade, and I feel it is better you move to something manageable." Her words hit like a punch. "Move? But this was my home. Noel and I built a life here. Wade grew up here." Wade spoke finally, his voice low. "Mom, Romy is right. It is a lot to keep up." "I am not helpless, Wade," I answered, my voice cracking. "Your father and I saved for this home. Every room has a story." Romy's face turned cold. "Memories do not pay taxes, Myrtle. Be realistic." I looked at her, the same woman who had pushed me from my son's life for years. The same woman who made sure Wade missed every second Sunday dinner or holiday. "What exactly are you suggesting?" I asked, though I already knew. "We think a nice senior community would suit you," she said like it was a gift. "With activities, people your age, and less space. Better than rattling around in this house alone." I turned to Wade, praying he would oppose it. "Wade, you truly think I should give up the house where you grew up, where your father and I built everything?" "It makes sense, Mom," he interrupted. "And Romy and I could use the space. We want to grow our family, and this house has great potential." His words hit like ice water. They did not just want me gone. They wanted the house Noel and I had rebuilt over decades. Romy's mask dropped. "Now that the sorrow is gone, live your grief, pack and leave," she said. "The house was never yours." She said it like tossing furniture, not dismissing her husband's mother. Wade looked up, and for a second I saw doubt or guilt. But then he nodded. "He's right, Mom. This house was Dad's and now it is mine. You were just staying here." I felt the world spin. Just staying here, as if 32 years meant nothing. "I understand," I said, my voice calm but my heart breaking. Not just from loss, but from seeing who my son had become. I stood slowly, my legs weak. "I will need time," I said. 2 weeks, Romy interrupted. "Enough to find somewhere and pack." Not 2 months, not a kind timeline, just 2 weeks to erase a lifetime. Wade finally looked at me. What I saw hurt more than anger. It was detachment. Indifference to my pain. "It is for the best, Mom," he said like he was trying to convince himself. I went upstairs to the room I shared with Noel, each step heavy like climbing uphill. The room still smelled like him. His glasses sat on the nightstand untouched. I sat on our bed, staring into the mirror. The woman reflected looked older than 71. Her silver hair hung limp and her eyes dulled by sorrow. In 2 weeks I would leave the room where I last said goodbye. I would pack 32 years of memories into boxes for a son who just said I never truly belonged. But in the dark a tiny spark lit up. Under the grief was resolve. Noel handled our finances, but he taught me to watch the details. Tomorrow I would start. I would visit the bank and find out what was truly mine. Because if they thought they could erase me quietly, they would be mistaken. I needed to know what Noel left behind and in whose name. The morning sunlight looked different in the kitchen as I sat alone sipping coffee. 10 days had passed since that dinner. The house felt like it waited for me to vanish. Wade and Romy had already visited twice, measuring rooms and whispering plans like I was invisible. Yesterday I heard Romy on the phone arranging work for when the old woman leaves. I had spent those 10 days in shock, mechanically sorting things and ignoring the growing dread. But this morning I was ready to face what Noel would have wanted me to handle. The drive to First National Bank was 15 minutes through familiar roads. I had done this trip for 2 decades, always with Noel in the passenger seat. He managed the banking while I waited in the car. He was not hiding it from me. He just wanted me to worry less. Now I wished I had paid more attention. Mrs. Patterson, the bank manager, welcomed me with the kind of delicate sympathy people save for women who have recently lost their husbands. Mrs. Henderson, I was deeply saddened to hear about Noel. He always acted like a true gentleman and never forgot to ask me about my grandkids. Thank you, Helen. Please hit the subscribe button if this resonates with you, and let me know in the comments if you've been in a similar situation. He thought highly of you as well. I sat in the chair facing her desk, clutching my purse like it was a lifeline. I need to go over our finances. Noel handled all of it and I do not know where to begin. Helen's face softened as she nodded. Absolutely, let me pull everything up. She turned to her monitor, typing quickly. After a few seconds her eyebrows lifted. Oh my goodness. Is something wrong? I asked, immediately nervous. Had Wade and Romy managed to interfere already? Not wrong necessarily. Just that there are more accounts than I expected. Her voice held clear surprise. Let us begin with the shared checking account you and Noel used for everyday expenses. She handed me a printed statement. The balance was not huge, but certainly enough to get by for quite a while with careful spending. I felt a wave of relief. At least I would not be left with nothing. Helen continued. There is also a joint savings account. She printed another paper and passed it across. This one had a much larger balance. Enough to support me for several years if needed. That is reassuring, I said, feeling a small piece of tension lift. Noel was always a planner. Yes, he definitely was, Helen agreed, still frowning at the screen. Mrs. Henderson, I am noticing a few more accounts here that are only in your name. Do you recall when you and Noel last went over everything together? Only in my name, I repeated, startled. That does not sound accurate. He managed all the money. Helen began typing faster. Our files show 4 more accounts. 2 certificates of deposit, a money market account, and interestingly a trust fund opened 5 years ago. My mind started to reel. I do not understand. Noel never brought any of this up. Helen looked at me carefully. Did he ever show concern about your family situation? Sometimes people set up separate accounts to protect their spouse. I was caught off guard. Protect me from what? I asked. Helen paused as if selecting her next words with caution. In some cases, when families are complicated or inheritance might cause trouble, spouses take measures to secure their partner's future. I thought back to recent years and how Noel had started questioning Romy's shopping, or how quiet he would become if Wade brought up financial problems. He insisted on doing our banking himself and never let Wade join him even when our son offered to help. Can you explain these other accounts? I asked, my voice low. Helen printed several more statements. The first CD had renewed annually for 7 years. The second was opened 3 years back. The money market was receiving automatic transfers from your checking account. Just $50 here and there, but consistently. He passed me the documents. The numbers made my head spin. These were not small safety funds. These were large amounts. Enough for a home. Enough to live well for a long time. How could this happen? I asked. I never signed any of this. Actually, Helen said softly, retrieving a folder. You did sign. Your signature is on every form. Looks like Noel brought you in for routine paperwork and had you sign everything during those times. I stared at the pages she laid out. My signature clear, dated and witnessed. I began to remember some of those visits. Once we updated our address after new street numbers. Another time we changed account types. He never told me what those papers really meant, I whispered. That is not unusual, Helen said gently. Many partners handle the paperwork to avoid causing stress. Legally, everything is valid. Those accounts belong to you. I tried to absorb what that meant. While Wade and Romy were wandering around my kitchen planning changes as if I were already gone, I held access to money they knew nothing about. One more thing, Helen said carefully. The trust fund I mentioned has received deposits from a business account for the past 5 years. The Henderson Construction Trust. That was Noel's business, I confirmed. But he sold it after retiring. Wade said the money just paid off debts. Helen glanced again at her monitor. According to our info, the business account is still open. Deposits have been made regularly, then transferred into your trust. Mrs. Henderson, you might want to talk to the company accountant. There may be more to your financial picture. I walked out of the bank in a fog. My purse was now heavy with printed statements. Instead of heading home, I drove to a quiet cafe parking outside to look through what Helen had given me. The numbers were real. Somehow, without my knowledge, Noel had set up layers of protection. Each account and fund had been crafted to make sure I was safe. As I read the trust details, I noticed a pattern. The deposits matched times Wade had visited and asked for help. Larger amounts followed times when Romy hinted about money issues. Noel had been giving Wade help but quietly protecting even more for me. As if he knew that someday I might be left to stand alone. My phone buzzed. A message from Wade. Mom, Romy found a realtor. We can start showings next week. Hope you found a place. I stared at the screen. Then at the statements in my lap. They believed they were in charge. That I had no options. They had no clue how much power I now held. Tomorrow I would call the accountant. I needed to know what else Noel had done. Then I would figure out how to use this truth. That my husband loved me enough to make sure I would never need to beg. The grief was still inside me, sharp and overwhelming. But underneath that pain something else stirred. A quiet strength I had not felt in a very long time. The office of Morrison and Associates sat in a quiet strip mall between a dry cleaner and a tax shop. I had never been here. Noel always went alone, saying it was boring work. Now I saw it was not about boredom. He was protecting me from more than numbers. Margaret Morrison looked to be about my age. Her hair was gray and tied back neatly, and her face showed kindness behind metal-rimmed glasses. She had handled the company's books for over 15 years and had kept her voice very calm when I phoned. Mrs. Henderson, she said, gesturing to a seat. First, let me offer my condolences. Paul was a good man. I will miss our quarterly chats. Thank you. I only wish I had known that part of him better. I sat down, placing my purse beside me with the bank statements inside. I am trying to learn what is going on. The bank showed ongoing business deposits that I did not know about. Margaret looked surprised. You did not know? That is unusual. Noel often talked about you. I assumed. She paused, visibly weighing her next words. Please, I said, I need to understand all of this. My son insists the business was sold years ago and barely covered debts. Sold? Margaret's brows furrowed in confusion. Mrs. Henderson Construction wasn't sold. It was restructured. She turned her screen toward her, scrolling through records. 5 years ago, Noel transferred the company's assets into a trust, the Henderson Construction Trust. You're listed as the primary beneficiary. I felt the ground tilt under me. So I own the company? The trust does, and you own the trust. It's been doing quite well, honestly. Noel was selective after the restructure. Smaller jobs, dependable clients, stable profits instead of risky ventures. She handed me several printed pages. These are profit and loss statements from the last 5 years. You'll see consistent income. I stared at the figures, hands trembling. The profits were significant, enough to explain the steady deposits into the trust. But he retired, I murmured. He wasn't working. He stepped back, yes, but he still handled strategy and oversight. The day-to-day operations were handled by Tom Bradley. I nodded slowly. Tom had worked for Noel for decades, starting as an apprentice, later becoming foreman. At the funeral, his sorrow had seemed real, not performative. Tom's been essentially running things for the past 5 years, Margaret continued. Noel gave him a cut of the profits as a performance bonus, kept him motivated and loyal. The system worked well. But why didn't Noel tell me? I asked softly. Margaret hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. Mrs. Henderson, forgive me if I'm overstepping, but Noel did mention family concerns. He worried about your son's money problems and your daughter-in-law's spending. He feared that knowing about the income might cause pressure, demands that could jeopardize your future. It was all coming together. Every time Wade asked for help, every time Romy commented on our comfortable life, Noel had been weighing how to assist while keeping my future intact. He was protecting me, I said aloud, the realization heavy. He was protecting both of you in different ways, Margaret said kindly. He loaned Wade substantial amounts, but only from the business account, not your personal funds. And he documented everything. She pulled another folder from her drawer. Here are the loan agreements between the business and your son. Noel treated them like formal transactions, with interest, payment schedules, all proper. I opened the folder with trembling hands. Dozens of documents, all signed. Tens of thousands loaned over 5 years, for Wade's ventures, his so-called investments. Has Wade made any payments? I asked, already suspecting the truth. Margaret's face grew guarded. The schedule shows many missed payments. As of last month, he owed roughly $87,000, including interest. The number hit like a punch. Nearly $90,000 owed to a company Wade believed no longer existed. What happens to those debts now? I asked. They follow the business, she explained. And as the new owner of the trust, you have every right to enforce or renegotiate them. I thought of Wade and Romy measuring my kitchen, plotting renovations, assuming ownership. They believed the business was gone, that Noel left nothing. There's something else, Margaret said cautiously. Last month your son called me. Said that since his father passed, he'd be taking over the business. Asked for ownership transfer documents. I told him I'd need written permission from the trust beneficiary. He seemed genuinely surprised you were involved at all. So Wade had tried to claim the company too, counting on my grief or ignorance. The betrayal stung sharper than ever. Margaret, may I ask something in confidence? I said. If I want to keep the business running as is with Tom in charge, is that an option? Absolutely. Tom's been hoping to hear from you. He's concerned about the business's future, and his own. If you continue things as they are, I believe he'll be loyal and dependable. I gathered the papers, thoughts whirling. The business was mine. Wade's debt was real and legally binding. And none of them, neither Wade nor Romy, had any idea their ambitions were grounded in lies. Please schedule a meeting with Tom soon, I said. And I want to explore my legal options on the loans. Certainly. I'll call Tom this afternoon. And of course, everything we've discussed stays confidential. Thank you. As I drove home, my phone buzzed. A text from Romy. Myrtle, the realtor, wants to schedule a photographer for tomorrow. Please make sure the house is tidy. First impressions matter. I stared at the screen, then tucked it away, silent. Let them plan their photo shoots. Let them envision their bright future funded by an inheritance that didn't exist. They didn't know the foundation beneath them was crumbling. That evening, I entered Noel's study for the first time since his death. Every document was in place, each file labeled and filed. I now saw why he'd been so insistent about order, why every signature mattered. He hadn't just been organizing papers. He'd been building a fortress. And tomorrow I would start testing its strength. The next morning, Tom Bradley sat at my kitchen table, his weathered hands around a coffee mug. At 55, his broad frame and calloused hands spoke of years of labor, but his eyes showed a quiet unease. Mrs. Henderson, he began, voice raspy with emotion, I won't lie, I've been worried sick since Mr. Noel passed. Wade came by the job site last week. Talked about evaluating assets and streamlining things. Didn't sound good for people like me. I poured another cup, the rhythm of it calming me. What exactly did my son say? Said the family was in financial trouble. That hard choices were coming. He wanted a full list of contracts, our equipment inventory and current cash flow. Even asked for the office and equipment yard keys. Tom's jaw clenched. I told him I'd need instructions from whoever was really in charge now. Mr. Noel always said that if anything happened, I should wait for proper legal direction. He looked directly at me. He never said that would be Wade. Relief washed through me. Noel had thought this through. He'd prepared Tom to resist manipulation, to hold the line. Tom, I said, I need to tell you something in strict confidence. This conversation stays between us. He nodded solemnly. You have my word, ma'am. I laid the documents Margaret had given me on the table. I own Henderson Construction, not Wade, not the estate. Me. Noel transferred the business to a trust years ago, and I'm the beneficiary. Tom's eyes widened as he examined the documents. Well, would you look at that? Excuse my language, ma'am, but Mr. Noel always played the long game. He surely did, and based on what I see here, the company has been doing very well under your leadership. A flicker of pride touched Tom's face. Please hit the subscribe button if this resonates with you, and let me know in the comments if you've been in a similar situation. We have earned a solid name, Mrs. Henderson. Loyal customers, good standards, honest pricing. Mr. Noel always told me that clients who keep coming back are more valuable than any one-time big win. I told him I wanted no changes at all. But I also needed clarity. Wade has not been entirely truthful about how the family stands financially. Have you ever discussed money matters with him? Tom's mood shifted. Over the years, yes. He would appear when Mr. Noel was not around and ask about account balances, trying to get a sense of incoming payments. A couple of times he hinted that the business might help him out with some temporary money for investments. And how did you respond to that? I told him he needed to speak with his father. I am not naive, Mrs. Henderson. I could tell something was off. Tom's tone firmed. Last year he actually went to the bank the same day we deposited a large check from the Morrison building job. Claimed it was just by chance, but he seemed extremely interested in the transaction. My gut tightened. Wade had been tracking the company's income, probably trying to time his loan requests with when cash was most available. Tom, I need to ask you something important, and I want the truth. Do you think Wade has any real idea about the money that has flowed through this business? Tom paused, weighing it. I think he realizes it is more than the family led him to believe, but I doubt he knows the real numbers. Mr. Noel always kept business separate from personal finances, at least in writing. What exactly do you mean? Well, your husband was cautious. When Wade would ask for help, Mr. Noel would claim the business was under pressure and money was tight, but he would still find a way to help him, usually drawing from the business account but listing it as a loan. Tom pulled out a small worn notebook. I have a record of everything, Mrs. Henderson. Mr. Noel taught me to log all transactions. Based on my notes, Wade has received about $93,000 over 5 years. That amount was more than what Margaret had shown me. Payments listed as loans. That is what I mean by smart. He made them look like official loans with schedules and due dates. But he never enforced any of it. Wade would miss payments and Mr. Noel would just let it go. So now Wade assumes he owes nothing. WD acts like nothing is owed. Tom corrected him. Whether he believes that or chooses to ignore the truth, I cannot say. As if summoned, a car door slammed outside. I looked through the kitchen window and saw WD's Honda parked behind Tom's truck. That is my son, I said softly. I would rather he not know we talked business. Tom nodded and swiftly returned the documents. Mrs. Henderson, no matter what you decide, I stand with you. Mr. Noel was an honorable man and he placed everything in your hands. That is good enough for me. Wade entered without knocking. Something Noel would have disliked, but I had grown used to. Morning, Mom, he said with barely a glance at Tom. Did not expect to see anyone here. Tom came by to check in on me, I replied calmly. You know how thoughtful he has always been. Right. Wade was already scanning the kitchen, eyes moving like a realtor. Actually, Tom, I am glad you are here. We should discuss the business. Tom's face became unreadable. Well, now that Dad is gone, some changes need to be made. The family must take stock of assets and decide how to handle obligations. I observed him with curiosity. WD spoke like a man already in charge. He had no idea he was reaching for something never offered. What kind of changes? Tom asked. We will need to assess whether keeping the business running makes sense or if liquidating everything and paying off debts is more practical. Wade sounded like he was discussing dinner plans. I understand. And who is responsible for these decisions? Wade paused, not expecting that. The family, of course. I will be managing Dad's business matters from now on. Is that so? Tom's voice was steady but held an edge. Mom, maybe you could make some coffee. W.D. said, brushing me off like he had so often during serious talks. Tom and I need to go over a few technical points. But I did not move. For the first time in a long time I stood firm. I will stay. This is my kitchen. Tom is my guest. W.D. looked caught off guard but did not argue. Fine. Tom, I need a full inventory of all equipment, vehicles, and existing jobs. I will also require access to business bank accounts so I can review the finances. I would be happy to help with that, Tom said slowly. Who should I speak to for official approval to access those accounts? Me, naturally. And you legally have the right to manage Henderson Construction's finances. W.D.'s certainty faltered. Because I am Noel Henderson's only son and heir. I see. Do you have any legal proof granting you the authority to act for the business? Silence filled the kitchen, broken only by the clock ticking over the sink. W.D.'s expression shifted between irritation and hesitation. Look, Tom, I do not think you understand. Wade said, voice tightening into condescension. This is not hostile. I am just sorting out Dad's estate and making sure everyone gets their fair share. But I cannot do that if you create roadblocks. I am not trying to cause problems, Tom replied steadily. I just need to know who I should be answering to. Your father was very clear about following protocol. W.D. turned toward me, clearly expecting support. Mom, explained to Tom that I am managing Dad's company now. I looked at him, the son who planned to sell my home, who took nearly $90,000 while insisting there was nothing left, and I made my decision. Actually, Wade, I think Tom is right to request proper documentation, I said. Your father was always precise about business matters. W.D. stared at me as if I had just spoken another language. What are you saying? I am saying that everything must be handled properly and by the book. You can understand why that is important. For the first time during this exchange, W.D. looked unsure. Watching that doubt grow across his face, I felt something unfamiliar stir inside me. Power. The call came at 7 in the morning, 3 days after my confrontation with Wade in the kitchen. I had been expecting it. Questioning someone's self-appointed power comes with consequences when that person is used to complete control. Mom, we need to talk right now. W.D.'s voice was stiff with restrained rage. Romy and I are coming over. Is it not a bit early? This is urgent. We will be there in 20 minutes. He hung up before I could respond. I took my time dressing, choosing the navy dress Noel always said made me look respectable. If we were going to have another face-off, I was going to be ready. They arrived precisely 20 minutes later, Romy's heels clicking sharply on the steps. I opened the door before they could knock, keeping the subtle power of welcoming them into my home on my own terms. Good morning, I said cheerfully as if they were simply stopping by for a chat. Romy brushed past me into the living room, holding her designer handbag like a shield. W.D. entered right behind her, his expression dark. They did not sit down. Instead, they remained standing, carefully placing themselves between me and the entrance in what was clearly a move to intimidate. Mom, I do not know what sort of stunt you are trying to pull, Wade began. But Tom Bradley contacted me yesterday. He told me he could not share any business information with me unless I provided proper authorization. What exactly did you say to him? I eased into Noel's favorite armchair, the one that gave the best view of the room. I told him to follow standard protocol. That is exactly what your father would have insisted on. Standard protocol? Romy nearly screeched. Wade is Noel's son and rightful heir. What more proof does anyone need? Legal proof, I replied steadily. The kind that includes actual ownership. Wade's eyes narrowed dangerously. What are you trying to say? Dad's will clearly gives everything to the family. I am the executor, which means I manage all of it until the estate is resolved. That is not entirely true, Wade. I reached for the folder I had set on the side table earlier, the one containing every legal paper Margaret Morrison had handed me. W.D. and Romy visibly tensed when they saw it. Your father's will does leave his personal belongings and this house to the family, I said slowly. But Henderson Construction was excluded from the estate. It has not been part of it for 5 years now. What are you even saying? WD demanded. I took out the trust documents and placed them between us on the coffee table. Since 2019, Henderson Construction has been under the Henderson Construction Trust. I am the sole named beneficiary. The silence was thick. Romy was the first to react, snatching the papers with trembling fingers and reading the legal language quickly. Wade leaned over her shoulder, his face paling with each sentence. This cannot be real, Romy whispered. You have never known anything about finances. You never even managed the checkbook. That is true. I never did. Your father handled every financial decision. But clearly he saw things in this family I failed to recognize. Wade sank into the couch like the air had been knocked out of him. But the business was struggling. Dad always said money was tight, barely enough to stay open. The truth is the business has been doing very well. I have the financial statements for the past 5 years. I handed him another set of files. Watching his face shift as he absorbed the numbers was like watching someone discover they had been playing the wrong game the whole time. These profits. Wade's voice dropped to a whisper. Where did it all go? A fair share went to you, Wade. A significant amount, in fact. I pulled out another stack, the loan records. $87,000 over 5 years to be precise. Romy grabbed those pages next, flipping through them in disbelief. These are labeled as loans. Wait, you told me those were gifts. You said your father was helping us get on our feet. They were gifts, Wade said quietly, though even he did not sound convinced. Dad never asked for the money back. He never said a word about repayment plans. Actually, he did, I replied softly. Margaret Morrison kept records of every conversation, every delayed payment, every time your father gave you more time instead of collecting what was owed. I watched as the truth settled in. Wade had lived assuming his father would always be there to back him up. He had probably made financial promises based on that belief. But this does not really change anything, Romy snapped suddenly, her voice rising with urgency. The house still goes to Wade. That is more valuable than a small construction company. Is it really? I asked evenly. Romy's eyes sparked with a mix of desperation and fury. Do not play coy, Myrtle. This house is worth at least $400,000. You are right. It is a beautiful property. Though there is still the issue of the mortgage. WD looked up quickly. What mortgage? Dad said the house was completely paid for. It was. But about a year and a half ago your father took out a home equity loan. Quite a large one, actually. I retrieved the final set of papers, the ones I had discovered just the day before in Noel's study. They were neatly stored in a folder labeled emergency funds. A loan secured by the house for $350,000, I continued. That amount was deposited into the Henderson Construction Trust account. Meaning it became part of what I inherited. Romy turned pale. That is not possible. We would have known. We would have had to co-sign. Your father was the only legal owner of the property at that time, I explained. I was listed with survivorship rights but not as co-owner. He did not need anyone's signature. WD stared down at the papers as if they were written in code. But why would he do that? Why would he risk the house to fund the business? For the first time I allowed my voice to tremble with emotion. Because he was protecting me, Wade. He wanted to ensure I would always be financially secure. Protecting you from what? Wade's voice cracked. From this, I said, motioning toward them. From being pushed out of my own home by family members who saw me as a nuisance. From being left behind while others helped themselves to what they believed they deserved. Romy finally snapped. You tricked him. You made a dying man rewrite everything. Your father was not dying when he set those trusts up, Romy. He was thinking ahead. And the fact that he felt the need to do so should say something about how he viewed our family's behavior. Wade's hands shook as he gently laid the papers down. Mom, surely we can figure something out. You do not want to manage a construction company in this house. This is our family home. You should stay with us. It is staying in the family, Wade. With me. But the mortgage payments, Romy said, nearly begging. How can you afford them? Just as your father intended. With income from Henderson Construction. Tom Bradley assures me that the company is financially sound. Margaret Morrison confirmed that the cash flow easily supports the loan payments, with enough left over for me to live comfortably. I stood and smoothed my dress. You mentioned moving out earlier. I still think that is the best plan. Not for me, obviously, but I am sure the two of you can find something cozy to start again. Wade stared at me like he was seeing someone unfamiliar. Mom, you cannot be serious. After all Dad gave you, all that our family means. Your father gave me everything, I said firmly. He loved me enough to make sure I would never depend on anyone's mercy. Not even my own children. And now I finally understand how much that protection meant. Romy was already storming toward the door, her face twisted in rage. This is not finished, Myrtle. We will contest all of this. You are welcome to try, I said without emotion. But you should know your father handled every detail by the book. Margaret Morrison is extremely thorough. My lawyer already has copies of every relevant file. Wade hesitated at the door, looking both wounded and confused. I just do not get it, Mom. Why are you doing this to us? I am not doing anything to you, Wade. I am only refusing to let you do it to me. After they left, I sat alone in the stillness of the house, my house, and felt a sensation I had not felt since my youth. I was financially independent. I owed no one, and nothing they did could take that away. Noel had left me more than wealth. He had left me freedom. Half a year later, I stood on the porch of my oceanfront cottage, watching sunlight stretch across the Pacific like a promise. The rhythm of the waves had become my daily symphony, replacing the creaks and whispers of the old house. The cottage in Mendocino was smaller, yes, but it was completely mine. Every chair, every curtain, every color on the walls reflected my taste alone, not a compromise shaped by decades of someone else's preferences. And to my surprise, I discovered I had excellent taste when no one else was offering their opinion. Henderson Construction continued to thrive under Tom Bradley's steady hand. Every Friday he called with updates on contracts, clients, and quarterly profits, which now landed quietly and directly in my account. I'd kept my promise. The business ran just as Noel had designed it, and that structure seemed to comfort everyone involved. The cottage itself had been an unexpected gift. While reviewing the trust holdings, Margaret Morrison uncovered a property deed tucked into a file, along with a note in Noel's handwriting. For Myrtle's retirement, when she's ready for ocean air and no schedule but her own. Even in death he was still looking after me. This morning was different. My lawyer was coming by to finalize the last piece of business from my old life. Wade and Romy had tried to contest the trust, hiring a high-powered attorney specializing in elder law and financial exploitation. It didn't go well. Not only was every arrangement legal and documented, but a deeper review revealed that W owed even more than we thought. Interest and penalties brought the total to just over $96,000. At 10 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. James Patterson, no relation to Helen at the bank, was as always punctual. His calm efficiency had carried me through the most exhausting chapters of this ordeal. "Good morning, Myrtle," he said, settling into his usual chair by the window. "I have the final settlement agreement for your review." I poured coffee from my French press, another small but satisfying skill I'd picked up in this new life, and sat down across from him. "How did they take it?" His expression hinted at restrained amusement. "About as well as you'd imagine." Wade's attorney argued that family obligations should override debt agreements. The court didn't agree. The final deal required Wade and Romy to repay the full amount over 8 years, assuming they never missed a payment. They tried once more to plead for a family forgiveness clause. "Wade broke down at the end," James said, "told me you were choosing money over your only son." "And what did you say?" "I reminded them I represent your financial interests, not your family dynamics. Though, I may have mentioned that most mothers don't have to sue their children to recover legitimate debts." A small smile crept across my face. One final clause in the agreement offered reassurance. If Wade or Romy defaulted, the business could garnish wages or place liens on any property they acquired. It wasn't revenge, it was protection. The kind Noel would have wanted for me. James handed me a separate envelope. "This came yesterday." The handwriting on the front was unmistakable, Wade's. Inside was a short note. "I know you probably won't forgive me for fighting you, but I finally understand what Dad was doing. Losing everything made me realize how much I took for granted. Romy and I are in counseling. I'm working 2 jobs to meet the payments. I hope you'll talk to me someday. I'm sorry. Wait. I folded the letter gently and set it aside. Felt sincere. But it also came 6 months too late, and only after the consequences had arrived. Would you like me to reply? James asked. No, I said. If Wade wants to rebuild a relationship, he can do it the same way he'll repay his debt. Slowly, steadily over time. After James left, I took my coffee out to the deck and read the letter again. The grief was still there, not just for Noel but for the son I thought I'd raised. For the illusions I'd once mistaken for love. But beneath that sorrow was something stronger. Peace. Self-respect. The deep, quiet satisfaction of having stood up when it mattered most. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. The number was unfamiliar, but something about it tugged at my memory. Hello. Mrs. Henderson? This is Linda Morrison, Margaret's daughter. I hope I'm not intruding. Not at all, dear. What can I do for you? I've started a support group for women dealing with financial manipulation by family members. My mom told me about your story, and I was wondering if you'd consider speaking at one of our meetings. I hesitated. I'm not sure I'd know what to say. You'd be surprised how many women are in similar situations. Sons who feel entitled. Husbands who hide finances. Families who confuse love with control. Your story could help more women than you know. I looked out over the ocean. 6 months ago, I'd been a grieving widow nearly evicted from her own home. Today I was financially secure, living on my terms, beholden to no one. When would you like me to speak? Really? You'll do it. I will. But not to talk about revenge or lawsuits. I want to talk about boundaries. About the difference between love and servitude. About how my husband gave me the greatest gift. Independence, even from our own son. We scheduled the meeting for the following month. After hanging up, I realized something unexpected. Helping others navigate their own storms felt like purpose. Like honoring Noel's protection. Like affirming my own hard-won strength. That evening, like I did every night now, I sat on my deck with a glass of wine and watched the sun sink into the Pacific. The horizon blazed gold and rose, and I marveled at the simple truth. This view was mine. This peace was mine. No one could take it away. No one could decide I was expendable. No one could vote me out of my own life. Tomorrow I'd tend to my garden. Maybe visit the little bistro in town where the owner always saved me the window table. Small pleasures. Entirely mine. Wade's debt would be paid, either by his effort or the safeguards we'd set. But that was no longer my burden. My victory wasn't measured in dollars. It was in dignity. As the last light faded, I raised my glass in a silent toast. To Noel, for giving me not just love but freedom. To myself, for rising when it mattered. And to every woman still waiting to remember her worth. The ocean whispered on, eternal and unconcerned, as I sat alone, but never again powerless. And now, to you who've listened to my story, I wonder, what would you have done in my place? Have you lived through something like this? Share your thoughts below. And while you're here, I've linked 2 stories on the final screen. They're favorites on this channel and they just might surprise you. Thanks for watching.